Hello and welcome to today's video. I am so excited because I'm finally sitting down to rank my eyeshadow palettes. So, little context, I technically have 33 eyeshadow palettes, but one of them is new to me, so I'm not ranking this one. This is my newest, Natasha Denona. It's not even a month old. I don't feel like I can give it a fair ranking at this point, so I'm sure it will land in my top like 5 to 10 at least in the future. But for now, we're gonna treat it as if I'm ranking 32 palettes. So let's go ahead and jump in to the bottom two. So the bottom two I have here are, and honestly, I can't decide which one I dislike more. So they're kind of tied for the last ones. This is a NYX In Bloom little 6-pan palette. This came into my life very early on in me trying to get into makeup. It had some of those similar tones to Modern Renaissance, and it was a palette that I reached for quite a bit. It was easy for me to throw like the brown in my crease and the gold on my lid, but you know, these days it's just kind of boring, not the best quality, and yeah, so it's down at the bottom. Another one that is at the bottom is my Athena palette from Bad Habit. I love the color story of this palette because I couldn't bring myself to pay the money for the dupe for what this palette is duping, the Huda Beauty Desert Dusk palette, but I am so disappointed with this palette because the shimmers in this palette are trash in my opinion. Like, they're too sheer. I don't know if that's actually like the same, you would get the same thing with the Huda palettes, but I don't like some of these shades are so beautiful and I want them to be more pigmented, but when I go to put them on, they're more like topper shades and I want them to be more pigmented and show up. And it's just not how I do my makeup, so I have to use a glitter glue to get the impact on these like I want them to, and also they don't end up being that exciting to me, so this is at the bottom. So coming in at number 30, I have a little happy birthday palette from NYX. This is a little gift that I got from Ulta one year, and the quality is okay, but the color story is also just not that exciting. Not something that I reach for a ton these days, and especially since my makeup collection has grown so much. So this is number 30. For number 29, I have my Makeup Revolution Reloaded Neutrals 2 palette or something like that. Yeah, Neutrals 2. And the color scheme on this I was actually very attracted to, but I have to say the mattes in here are much better than the shimmers, and for that reason this falls way low. I'm not impressed with the shimmers on this palette. So this one is coming in a little bit higher because it is an all matte palette. And again, I don't mind the mattes in this Makeup Revolution formula world, but it's also a very boring palette. It is duping the Kat Von D Shade and Light palette. I'm glad I never spent the money on the full size because I've learned that I just would not use it. And so I do think the quality of these shadows is very good, though I will say that. It's just not something that I reach for a ton. I have another all matte palette that you'll see higher up on my list that I prefer more than this one. Next up is another NYX palette, and this is my Ultimate Brights palette. I wanted to love this thing so much, and I have to say it's a little too, like, some of the shades can, when you go to build them up, they can just kind of flake away. Like, not flake, but they just sheer out to nothing. Like, they don't build up as well as I want them to, and they're not as pigmented as I want them to be. This one here I dropped before, and this blue shade I had to repress because it shattered a little bit, and I have to, it performs so much better once I repressed it. But a palette you shouldn't have to do that to love a palette. So that is part of the reason why this one is falling so low on my list. Coming in at number 26, I have another colorful palette, and this is the Take Me Back to Brazil palette by BH Cosmetics. And this is one that I love the shade selection that they give you, but again, a lot of these shades in here are not good. They're not consistent. Some of these shades are great and some of them are just bad. I don't like any of the shimmers that they give you in here. They're not shimmery, and some of the mattes are very good, but some of them are just, again, hit and miss, and they take too much building or they blend out too much. And I wanted this palette to be something that I really liked a lot more than I do, and I'm kind of disappointed in it. Moving into number 25, this was one that I'm surprised is this high, and it's not very high on the list, but I'm surprised it's not at the very bottom. This is my Gigi Hadid Maybelline palette, and this, I have to say, the little quality on these little mattes are quite good. I've hit pan in 2 shades. This is something I could see myself maybe trying to baby pan that palette in the future because I actually do think that these shades are nice and soft. I like a nice soft shadow, and these shades are actually pretty good quality, so I definitely like that palette. Coming in at number 24, another one that I'm surprised isn't kind of like dead last is this little Lancome like little 5-pan. And again, these shades are really soft. I don't really love this big shade here, but these shimmer shades are actually pretty like very, very shimmery, and I quite like them. And not to mention that they're a little bit more unique in my collection, so I think that's also why it's kind of moving up in the ranking here, because they're a little bit more cool tone, and I kind of like having this little guy to travel with and keep around for that reason. I believe this is number 23. This is my Lorac Shine Bright palette. I really like Lorac shades, but this palette is one that I don't love all the color selection that is in this palette. So for me, the purple shade here is, I don't really like it. I don't really love these kind of blues on me, and then the rest of the shades are not really unique. I kind of got suckered into buying this just because I was like, oh, I really like the Lorac formula, and I just kind of went with it on sale at Christmas time last year, and it's probably one that I could have done without, even though the formula is really nice. The color story is not that great, so it's falling a little lower than I might have expected it to. Next up is my Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette, and this is one that I got early on in me trying to figure out if I liked eyeshadow or not. And I enjoyed the palette then, but the more I use this, the more I kind of am frustrated by the colors that come in here. So the matte shades in here are actually very nice, but I want more variety. I feel like there's so many of the same like warm tone, brownie leaning shades. And some of these shades here to me call for, I want more neutral to cool tone like transition and shades to use with them, and they're not in here. They're not in here for me, and it frustrates me. I want a little bit more color in my transition too, and so a lot of times I don't end up pulling for that. And also, for whatever reason, my Morphe palette it did this so early on. It pulled away from the board and it started to curl, and it's annoying to me. So I don't reach for this as much as I should, and for that reason it's kind of falling a little bit further down the list. One above my Jaclyn Hill palette is this Lorac Pirates of the Caribbean palette, and this one is, again, I love the Lorac formula, but this one is so chunky packaging. So I do like, I probably wouldn't complain one bit about the packaging if I'd managed to get my hands on the cheek palette that fits in here, because I just think that is so creative. I was not able to get my hands on it, but I love some of these shades, but some of them I don't. So for me, probably about half the shades in here I don't use, and that's one of the big reasons that it's not moving up higher on the list. Coming in at number 20, I have my Juvia's Place Saharan palette, and this is one that I actually really like the quality of these shadows, but I don't really love the color story as much as I thought I would. Some of these shades are very, like this one, I'm just not excited by. I don't really love this dark blue up here, not a shade that I reach for, and the rest of them are just, they're not that unique to my collection, like a bronze, another kind of like rose bronze, like not really that unique. These two shades are the most exciting thing in the palette to me, and for that reason it's just not that exciting, and therefore not that high up on the list. I believe this is number 19. This is my Too Faced Natural Eyes palette, and this guy is, it's also not that unique, but at the same time I do really like the little packaging here. It leans a little bit more cool tone, and so for that reason it falls slightly behind the next one, which is its kind of fraternal twin, which is the Natural Matte palette. And to me, this has a mix of both cool tones and warm tones, and I like this one just a smidge better than the Natural Eyes one. So that one is coming in just slightly in front of its fraternal twin. Okay, I believe this is number 17. This is my Little Pony from ColourPop. And this was just kind of an impulse buy because it was on clearance and I had never tried ColourPop shadows, and I really wanted to try them. So this is a palette that I grabbed. The color story to me is a little bit hard to work with in and of itself, but it has some really beautiful shades. Like this shade, I don't really pull for this kind of shade a lot. Again, I also don't tend to use very dark shades like this, but the rest of them are very pretty, and I really like this palette. It is quite inspiring because I actually do really love to mix this like berry kind of purpley shade, and I think that both this shade here, this little icicle looking shade, it's a perfect little topper shade for that, and I really like them together. So this one is one that pushes me outside of my comfort zone a little bit, but I really like it, so it's landing where it is. Next up is another My Little Pony palette, and this one was one that I grabbed from Kohl's for like less than $10 on clearance, and I was mostly curious about the pure formula, and I have to say, like, I am both pleasantly surprised and also kind of sad when I tried this formula. The mattes in this palette are awesome. The shimmers I find kind of difficult to work with. I have to, actually, I usually use my fingers to apply most shimmers, and I think these work better with a brush, and I have to wet them or use them over glitter glue, which I don't love. But at the same time, even though it has more drawbacks than the guy that fell right behind it, this one to me is a more inspiring color story. I really love this color story so much. I think it's so fun, and that's why it's kind of winning out a little bit over the other My Little Pony palette. Coming in at number 15 is a little mini palette from Natasha Denona, and this is the mini Layla palette. And this one to me is such a fun little palette. I can wear these 2 shades on the in here and just do a crease and lid all over lid shade, and it can make me look very bronzed and very put together. And then if I want a more like poppin', really intense kind of sultry look, I can use these 3 and do like a halo eye, and it's also very beautiful. So this is a fun little palette. I think it gives me kind of a neutral look, and it gives me a really fun pop of color, and I really like this little thing, so that is where it's falling in number 15 slot. Number 14 is another Lorac palette. This is the Mega Pro 2, and this one is one that I quite like the mattes up here very much. They're very beautiful. I don't wear the purples a ton, but they do perform really well. And then I love the, like, from here, well, I don't love dark sienna, but I love all of these shades. And then these 4 over here, not really for me. But the majority of this palette actually works for me, and I'm excited by, and I am inspired to reach for. So this one is coming in at number 14. Number 13 is another Mega Pro palette. This is number 4. This was my first ever high-end palette that I bought, and I fell in love with high-end palettes at that point. I was like, okay, it's worth it. I'm gonna start trying a bunch of other ones. So this is probably mostly to blame for the fact that I have 33 palettes now. This is the one that should be like blamed. But this one to me is a little bit, it comes in right above its little, again, brother or sister, because this color story to me is way more fun. I love this denim shade. I think the mattes up here are really solid options. I really like light transition shade, and this palette gives me some. I do wish it had some more mid-tone transition shades, but it doesn't quite do that for me. But then these, minus, again, those 4 on the end, these shimmer shades are so much fun. This shade here, Fairy or Unicorn, so beautiful. I have so much fun with that color, and it's not really showing up on my finger very well or on my swatch very well, but this one is one that I have a lot of fun with. Another one that I really like is Fairy Tale, and the color story here is more inspiring to me than its sibling, and so that's why this one's coming in slightly above. Coming in at number 12, I have my Pure the Grinch palette, and this is one that, again, surprised me. I like this palette. I like the entire palette. I think the colors in here are very smart. I've used all of them. I have Hit Pan and Cave. The highlight is grown on me. When I first tried it, I didn't really like it. The blush is a little bit more pigmented than I like, but at the same time, I think it's a very fun undertone that I don't really have a lot of in my blush collection. These glitter shades I find are beautiful. I don't really like wearing these kind of reds a lot, and they're so creamy. Oh wow. This shimmer shade is 10 times better than the one in this Pure palette, and I love this little palette so much, and I'm shocked that I like it as much as I do. So this one is honestly, my biggest complaint about this palette is the packaging. Even though it's beautiful, and the only reason why I'm complaining is because I am living in Sweden and we'll have to get this home eventually, and it takes up a little bit more space than I would like it to in a like carry-on luggage. But if I were living in the US and didn't have to worry about moving it, I wouldn't have that complaint at all. All right, coming in at number 11, I have my first Morphe palette here. This is actually my newest Morphe palette, but I have gone back and forth with moving this one on the list. At one point I had made this ranking and was supposed to film it months ago and just put it off, and this was way further up, and then the more I've used this, the more it started to fall down. So for me, I realized after playing with it for months now, I do not really like the purple shades in here. Just they don't work for me. I don't get excited by them. They're all kind of the same tone purple, which is not my favorite. Like I want some, if I want to do a purple, like I want a little lilac, I want a little something different, and they're all kind of like this dark sultry purple, which is just not my style. The pinks in here are fine, but they're kind of, again, all that same pink tone, which don't get me excited. Now these browns over here, these camel browns and bronzes, I love. The greens, that's the reason why I bought this palette, but for me it's so frustrating because they take a lot more work to build up to the color and get them the color I want them to be than I think I should have to do. Another thing with this palette and these greens are that I have to dig. Let me show you. I have to like dig into this green to get it to build up like I want it to. It does build, it does not seal up. It's not like a hard pan situation really, because it does build, but I just have to kind of really dig in there to get it like the way I want it to. So again, can you kind of see that? Like even then it doesn't look that great. I'd have to dig in a little bit more and really get it to chunk up on my finger before I can go in and lay it down, and then I start to get the color payoff that I want. And for that reason, this has kind of fallen down on my list over the past year. Okay, we are moving into my top 10. Here we go. Number 10 is my Violet Voss Rainbow Palette, and this one was a gift from my husband, but I think that when I want a colorful, like metallic shade, this is what I go for. I initially bought this palette because I was drawn to this pinkier, but man, and these shades are beautiful, but the shade, it's not even my favorite shade. In fact, I think I will wait, and possibly if you're interested in seeing another video, I want to film a video where I go through my favorite shade from each palette. So yeah, this one, stunning quality, very beautiful shades, and because it doesn't really have other options, this is a one-trick pony in that it gives you very bright, colorful metallics. That's why it's not further up on the list, even though it is a very nice formula. Coming in at number 9 is my Sultry palette, and this was one that I'm surprised it's not further up on the list. I kind of, when I bought this, I was like, oh, this is gonna be nice. This is gonna be one of my top favorite palettes. But I have such complaints with this palette. I love the formula. I think the formula is spectacular, but I hate that they didn't do something else with some of these colors. Like these colors, Ember, Cinder, and Teak, they're so similar, and it breaks my heart because I feel like if you swap them out for something a little different, it would be a perfect palette for me, and it's just, they're too similar. And I don't get why we did 3 kind of brownish, kind of shades, and it's just not exciting. It breaks my heart. Like I want it to be so much more exciting than it is, but yet the quality is still there. And so it is landing in my top 10 for that reason. Coming in at number 8 is one that I don't like the formula of as much as Sultry, but the colors in here are just slightly more intriguing and more worth it. And the amount of work that I have to do to get them to where I want them is not ideal, but at the same time, these colors over here, they are stunning. And for that reason, I'm ranking it a little bit taller. So this blue, I mean, hello, that is gorgeous. To get it to show up on my eyes the way I want it to, I have to put it over glitter glue, and even then it fades and creases throughout the day, but I still think that that shade is beautiful. So, and also this green in the pan looks so beautiful, but on my skin tone, it pulls very bronze and less green, and that's a little heartbreaking. But at the same time, still that blue pushes this up into the top 10 for me. Coming in at number 7 is an all matte palette from Dose of Colors, because I find their matte formula is spectacular and great, and this is the Marvelous Mauves palette. Now, I don't always wear mauve looks, but when I do, this is the one I want to go to. It is beautiful. I can layer this with single shadows that I have for like my lid shade, and I love it for that reason. So very good quality. I'm very satisfied with this palette. Moving into number 6, I have my Lorac Pro 3. And this is a very beautiful neutral shade palette. This is just neutral lover's dream. If you're medium to dark skin tones, it probably wouldn't work for you, but if you're light skin tone, this is nice. And it's just a palette. This is my go-to palette when I want to do a bold lip. This is the one I grab for most of the time because it's just gonna give me, it's gonna make it look like I worked really hard on my eyeshadow, even though it's neutral, and they blend super well. And I was pleasantly surprised by this palette, and so it's up at number 6. Okay, here we go into the top 5. Number 5 is my Modern Renaissance palettes by Anastasia Beverly Hills. I'm actually surprised this is landing in the top 5 because in the beginning of this year, I don't think I was that excited by this palette. The more I have traveled in this later half of the year, the more that I've fallen in love with this palette. It is a neutral palette. It has a little bit of color options for you, but I think the versatility of this palette is insane. Like, you get some oranges, some warm oranges, you get some neutrals like warm taupe, and Primavera and Vermeer are also very neutral. Bon Fresco and Antique Bronze lean a little bit more, like you can make them into like a cool tone look together. And then you have these pops of color in Red Ochre, Venetian Red, and Love Letter. And I think that this is just such a nice, well-rounded palette that I get the hype around it, even though there's a part of me that wants to find reasons to not like it. I just can't help myself, and I really enjoy this palette. Coming in at number 4, this one might be a little controversial for some people, but this is my Morphe 3502 palette. And my biggest complaint with this palette is that I could probably pick 10 shades out of here, my 10 favorites, and never use the rest of the palette. But my 10 favorite shadows in this palette make me more excited than almost everything else in my collection. I love this second row, and I love a couple of these up here, and even like I think it's this guy here. Beautiful shades, they blend very well. This red, I love this red. They are my go-to like game day looks. If you're a Georgia fan and you haven't tried this palette for red eyeshadow, you're missing out, because those shades are so beautiful. They're so bright and like vibrant on my eyes that even though this palette is like half wasted on me, the fact that those shades exist, this palette gets me so excited and so inspired that it's landing in my top 5 for sure. All right, number 3 is my BH Cosmetics Weekend Festival palette. I really love this palette. I ordered this palette at the same time as the Take Me Back to Brazil palette, and had I tried this one before that, I don't even think I would have bought that palette, because this palette is so fun. The colors on here are so beautiful. The quality of these shadows are spectacular. They perform like high-end shadows, legitimately. And these shades, Electric, Dippy, my favorite in the palette, Neon, Euphoria, these are some really gorgeous go-to shades. I think the only thing that's missing for me is a couple more transition colors. I would love to see just a couple more, like matte ones, but these shades are gorgeous. I love them so much. So this is number 3 in my collection. Okay, my final 2 I feel very passionate about, but this palette here is number 2. This is Subculture. This palette has the most inspiring, beautiful color scheme that I've ever seen in a palette. It is fall in a palette. It is gorgeous. I think the shades perform really well. I think I got really lucky that my palette doesn't have any issues. And I think I like this palette so much that I have to fight the instinct to not use it, because I don't ever want to run out of it, which is ridiculous, because obviously there aren't even any dips in this yet, and I use this palette so light-handedly for that same reason, because I think this palette is gorgeous. I will open this palette up and just stare at it sometimes because I think it's that inspiring and that beautiful. I love this cube shade. Electric is gorgeous. I love, even though you don't get a ton of shimmers, these shimmers in here are so perfect in my opinion. The matte shades, again, I think are very beautiful, and it's just so creative and fun and unique, and I just happy dreams, happy thoughts about this palette all day. And then finally is Norvina, and Norvina is getting in the number 1 spot, mostly because I think this color scheme is a little bit more wearable year-round compared to Subculture. And I just really like it. It's kind of right up my alley. I prefer more warm shades, and so the like eccentric shade, Incense, is a little bit more neutral, but it's not cool tone in my opinion. The eccentric shade is a very fun kind of orangey brown color. And yeah, I think Love is, it looks cool tone, but you can kind of make it very vibrant, and for that reason, it's just gorgeous. This one and Soul are 2 colors that I find so fun to wear, even though when I first got this palette, I was like, I'm not quite sure how to work with those, but I love them. And the Wild Child Celestial, I love those. Those are such fun pops of color in this palette, in what otherwise is a very neutral palette, and for me this is just perfect. When I want something fun, I have it. When I want something neutral, I have it. So that is my number 1 palette, the Norvina palette. So we have come to the end of this ranking here. Let me know if you're interested in seeing me rank my favorite. Actually, I think what I want to do is sit down, decide what my favorite shades and palettes are, rank those favorite shades, and then show you that video. So if you're interested in seeing something like that, make sure you say hello in the comments, let me know, and I will see you in the next one.